Hello YouTube, this is a quick rundown of my solar installation. It's a 2-panel, 200-watt system going into a 200 amp hour battery setup. So I have 2 panels. They are in parallel coming down to this gland housing, hole through the roof. There is butyl tape followed by screws to hold it down, and then there's Dicor over the top of that, self-leveling Dicor to prevent leaks. That comes down through the roof and into this blue ENT conduit. The conduit goes into the channels in the van and follows through. It's covered up at this point. Then it comes down this upright rail. Again, that's covered. And it breaks out down below, just inside of the door. And the ENT conduit follows its way up until you get to this load center. The load center has a 15 amp breaker in it, but the breaker for the system, for the solar panels, is actually up on top where it belongs. So your fuses need to be as close to the power source as possible. A fuse for the solar panel belongs as close to the solar panel as possible. So you see right there, there is a 10 amp fuse So this switch is really functioning more as a switch. This is a 15 amp breaker. It's redundancy in case of a short up above, but it really is just to function as a switch, so I can shut off the panels if I need to do maintenance. We come out of the bottom of the load center and into the charge controller. Those are the left black and red wires. The right hand black and red wires come down and they feed through, along with the inverter cables, they feed through these 2 gray conduits into the battery compartment that's in the back under the bed. You'll see that the positive comes down, goes through a 40 amp fuse, and then it comes up and feeds through the conduit along with the 1-aught inverter cable. So I have a fuse on this end because the rover can generate power. The fuse needs to be as close to the power generating source as possible. In addition to this fuse, on the same small line, and that is an 8 gauge wire. On the opposite end, because the battery is capable of generating power, I also have a 40 amp fuse. So on the thin wire, I have a 40 amp fuse on both ends. The wire is capable of carrying more load than 40 amps. Your fuse always has to be the weak link in the system. So the 40 amp fuse feeds the battery, so power from the charge controller goes down through the fuse, through the conduit into the battery compartment. It feeds the battery. Then coming back from the battery, there is a 200 amp breaker that's on the 1-aught red cable. So the red cable here is 3 feet long. There's a fuse, and then there's another 1-foot cable that connects directly to the 2 battery system. And in that line there is a 200 amp fuse. That also is as close to the battery as possible because the battery is what generates power. the inverter is not capable of generating any power on its own. So if there's a short in the system, the fuse for the inverter cables needs to be as close to the battery as possible. The negative is 4 feet long. It connects directly to the battery, and it feeds the inverter here. Then my inverter, right now I just have some Ryobi batteries plugged into it to charge those, and that's the system. So again, real quick, we come from the solar panels through the gland in the top, we go through the conduit, in through the channels in the van, comes out of that channel, feeds into this box, switch there. The switch feeds these two lines, which go into the left-hand side of the charge controller. The right-hand side of the charge controller, we go through a fuse and into the battery compartment. Then coming back from the battery compartment, we have two 1/0 cables properly fused in there as well. So total number of fuses in the system is 1 at the panels, 2 between the charge controller and the battery, 1 on each end, and then 1 on the inverter cables that feed the inverter, and that's at the battery end. So again, your fuses belong as close to anything that generates power as possible. That's as simple as I can put it. Charge controller generates power, fuse on this end. Battery generates power, fuse on the opposite end of the thin wires. And again, the battery generates power, so the 1/0 cables that feed the 2000 watt inverter are fused at the battery, because the battery is what generates power. So that's it. It's a brief overview of the system. I'll go in the back and show you the vented compartment. So I've lifted up my bed, put it up against the cabinets so I can access the battery compartment. The battery compartment is vented through the wheel well. Apologize for the bad lighting. So you see the two conduits that on the far end that are coming in from the charge controller and going out to the inverter. Along the wall on the right side, there's a 200 amp breaker. There's a 40 amp ANL fuse on the thin wire on this end that feeds the battery. The black wires come in and they feed the two 12-volt batteries that are wired in parallel. Right now I'm using flooded lead acid, so I did vent the compartment. It goes out just behind, the vent goes out just behind that fuse. You can't see it, but it goes into the wheel well, and there's a screen over it in the wheel well. These will be replaced with AGM batteries when there's a little bit more money available. But for now, I have two 12-volt 100 amp hour batteries for 200 amp hours of service. I apologize for the low light. I'm losing light here. It's toward the end of the day, but I wanted to get this video out. So that's it. That's my solar system, and I hope you like it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate you watching my videos and supporting the channel. I appreciate it.